Bitgardner's Office Hours. My name is John Kowalski. I'm part of the marketing team here at Bitgardner. Today we're talking about the Spectro2 Profiler and around controlling color, gloss, and grain texture. If you're unfamiliar with our office hours format, we'll begin with a shortened presentation from our subject expert, Mr. Corey Cohen. And that'll usually last 20, 25 minutes. And then it's followed by an open discussion, answering your questions, your challenges, what's going on in your facilities. If there's anything we can do to help, we're here. This is your time. So if you do have questions, please log them in the chat box. And immediately following the presentation, we'll get to them in the order we received them. Also, you will get a recording of this immediately following the webinar. You'll get an automated marketing message with a link that feel free to watch later, share with colleagues, use at date night, whatever you need to do, go for it. So with that, let me introduce our speaker. He's our Senior Applications Specialist, Corey Cohen. And there you go, sir. Take it away.
To today's discussion on controlling color, gloss, and grain with our new spectro2 profiler instrument, which you can see here. So this discussion will focus on not just texture and grain, not just the physical part of textured materials, but how different things about it affect the appearance. So it's not just about the physical structure. It's about things like the reflectivity or gloss. It's about things like color. There are a number of different factors that come into the overall appearance of these textured materials, and especially when it comes to trying to control for the appearance of textured materials, trying to make sure that different materials that are manufactured either differently or on the same production line stay consistent and look good next to each other, look consistent next to each other. So to that effect, the Spectro2 Profiler measures color, gloss, and surface structure to control for all those different aspects of the appearance. This is a new approach for objective measurement. It combines several different techniques into one instrument. So there are some inherent challenges when it comes to measuring textured materials, grainy materials in particular. Whenever we measure color or gloss, it's always ideal to measure on a perfectly flat, smooth surface. That's when you're going to get the most consistent results and the most, I guess I could say, accurate results. But of course, that's not always the case in real life. Sometimes we do have a need to measure grainy materials. And so this instrument does come with a 450 spectrophotometer built in, just like with our Spectra2 guide. It has the same technology, the same very precise, repeatable color technology that our Spectra2 guide has. And it is a 450, which means that it has 45-degree illumination and 0-degree detection, meaning just normal to the surface. And it is illuminated circumferentially. So these little boxes here are representing the light source that's used to illuminate the sample during color measurement. So you have 45-degree illumination all around, circumferential illumination, so that you get the same color measurement no matter which no matter which way you orient the instrument on your surface. But of course, it is often beneficial to measure gloss on our surfaces. And this is really where the difficulty in measuring grainy or textured surfaces come in, because gloss is inherently, a typical gloss meter measures the illumination comes in at an angle off of the normal, typically 60 degrees. That's the most commonly used gloss geometry. And so this does, this instrument, the Spectra2 Profiler, does come with a built-in 60-degree gloss meter, which meets all of those standard international specifications that you guys are used to. It has the same great performance as our standalone microgloss meters, which you see here. So that is built into the device. But this isn't always the best type of measurement for grainy surfaces. And this graphic here is showing us why. Because when you're dealing with textured surfaces, surfaces that have structures that are sticking up, so it's not perfectly flat, some of that light that's coming in at an angle is going to sort of bounce around and get lost in between those structures. So some of that light is going to be sort of bounced away from the detector just due to the structure of the surface and not necessarily the gloss or lack of gloss in the surface. So with very highly structured surfaces, you can often get falsely low gloss readings. And so you can have two surfaces that one appears much glossier than the other, but if they're both heavily structured, a typical gloss meter might say that they're very close in gloss, whereas visually we see something very different. So built into the spectro2 profiler, in addition to that 60-degree gloss measurement, we have a 2D reflectivity measurement. And in this case, the light is coming in from overhead. It's a straight down illumination. So now none of that light is getting lost or bounced away from the detector due to those big structures in the surface. And so now it's taking a straight reflectivity measurement, which greatly reduces the influence that that structure is going to have on the reading. So this is sort of a more true or a more accurate reading of the reflectivity, or something akin to gloss of the surface than just a typical 60-degree gloss measurement would do. So this reflectivity measurement, this 2D reflectivity measurement, it's indexed to a white, highly reflecting tile. Here we have an example of the picture that's taken when the reflectivity measurement is done. So this is a spatially resolved measurement. It's not just integrating or averaging the gloss over a certain spot size like a gloss meter does. It's actually taking a picture of the surface under this direct illumination, and it's sort of analyzing pixel by pixel the reflectivity of each point in this image on this surface. So this is a spatially resolved measurement. You get the reflectivity at each point on the surface, and then a mean reflectivity value is then calculated for the surface as a whole. So we have our 60-degree gloss measurement as well as our spatially resolved 2D reflectivity measurement. And in addition to that, we have a 3D topography measurement. And so this is done using what's called a photometric stereo technique, where it is illuminating the surface from multiple angles and taking pictures. It's using the same camera that's used for the reflectivity measurement, but now it's taking pictures of the surface illuminated at different angles. And due to the sort of shadows and the differences in the illumination that it picks up, it can construct a topographical map of the structured surface that you're actually measuring. So that looks like this. It can actually give you the height at each point along the surface. So again, this is a spatially resolved measurement. It's not just an average or an integrated measurement where you're getting one number. You're actually getting a whole map of the surface within that camera's view. So you get this topography map. You have here's the top view of the illumination, where it's illuminating the surface from 4 different angles and taking pictures at each in order to construct that topographical map of the surface. So there you have it. We have our spectro2 profiler, which has 45.0 color measurement and 60-degree gloss measurement, the same great performance from our standalone spectro2 color instruments, as well as our standalone microgloss instruments. But this one specifically for measuring grainy or structured surfaces. We also have that 2D reflectivity measurement, which is going to give us a more accurate representation of the reflectivity of the surface, and the 3D topography measurement, which is going to tell us things about the structure and about the structure of the surface and how that structure is affecting the look of the surface. So now that we have all of these measurements, we of course need to have handy and easy ways of analyzing these surfaces. You don't want to have to look at a topographical map of every surface that you produce in order to figure out if it's consistent or not. So there are specific algorithms designed for different types of materials to analyze different attributes and sort of reduce those pictures into numbers that are going to help us compare different surfaces and the visual effects that we get due to the structure. So we have three algorithms, one specifically made for coarse paint, one made for leather-like materials such as structured vinyl that you might see like in a car interior. And we also have a fine algorithm for finely structured paints as well as plastics. We do actually have a fourth algorithm that's been developed recently. It's a reverse leather-like algorithm for analyzing certain special types of structures. We won't have time today to go into every algorithm, so I've chosen the leather-like algorithm for us to discuss, to just kind of get a brief picture of how we're using this instrument to analyze these surfaces. So we have here three samples, sample 1, 2, and 3 with different grain types. And if you look at the grain or the texture of these surfaces, the things that might pop out to you about the texture, or at least the differences in these textures, are the grain size. And also, I guess a number of things might pop out to you, like the differences in lightness or the differences in apparent depth. But the grain size and the height are going to affect how we actually see these things. So in order to quantify this effect, we want to be able to determine the mean cell size, which we call the CS value. This is the average size of the individual cells, and the mean cell amplitude, the average height of each of these cells. So the way that's done, here we have a picture, a 3D topography picture of a surface. And what is done is it performs a topography segmentation using what we call the drop of water principle. So you can imagine it as rain falling on the surface, or the surface sort of being flooded with liquid. And so only these high points of these cells are going to stick up above these rivers that are flowing in the low points between these areas. So these rivers that surround these cells are going to define these closed cells. And of course, we can use that to calculate the size of the individual cells and then the average cell size. So here's sort of a side view of what's going on. We have these quote unquote raindrops falling in the low points between these cells, or between the high points. And this is actually adjustable using the software. You can adjust how high you want this sort of simulated, these simulated rivers to be, which can affect the data that you get. So you can sort of adjust things to better suit your specific application. And then again, once we get this segmentation, once these surfaces are segmented into these individual cells, we can calculate the mean cell size. And so it calculates, here we have the total area of the image is 15 by 15 millimeters. So it's going to calculate the size of each cell individually. Remember, this is a spatially differentiated picture. So it can do sort of high level pixel by pixel, very in-depth analysis of this surface, and calculate individually the size of each individual cell within the picture, and then average them to come up with the CS value, the average cell size. So here we have the watershed segmentation done for these 3 samples we saw before. And we can see kind of just by these images, we can see which ones appear to have larger cell sizes. And then here we have the actual calculation of the mean cell size, CS. So sample 2 has the largest cells at about 2.95 square millimeters. Sample 1 is next with 2.61, so these two are pretty close. And then sample 3 has much smaller cell size at 1.59. Here we have a new set of samples with 5 different samples with different depth. We have 100%, which is the grain with the deepest cells, the most depth, and then going down from there, 80, 60, 40, 20% having the least. And so we can see obvious differences within these. Of course, the deepest, the sample with the most depth is going to have the sort of grainiest look to it, and the one with the least depth looks the smoothest. So what we want to do is again quantify this by calculating the mean cell amplitude. So that's done again by using this spatially differentiated topographical map of this the surface that we've measured. And so what's done is the camera, the software calculates the maximum height of the localized cell as well as the closest neighboring minimum or the deepest part. So the highest parts are indicated with these X's in this image, and the lowest parts are indicated with these blue pluses. And so it calculates the amplitude of each individual cell by taking the difference between the local maximum and the closest neighboring local minimum, and then averages that difference across the entire picture for all of the cells in order to get the mean cell amplitude. So here we have the cell amplitude plotted against the depth. So here we have the 100% depth, the one that looks the grainiest, having the highest cell amplitude, and then of course the cell amplitude goes down fairly linearly with decreasing depth. Another set of samples here, and here we're getting again a slightly different look from sample to sample. The fact here is that each of these samples physically has very similar grain to it. The cell sizes are very similar, the depths are very similar, but they do have different reflectivities. And so again, we would like to quantify that reflectivity or the reflectivity contrast in order to sort of determine numerically how these are differing from each other. So the reflectivity contrast is taken by taking the reflectivity of the hills, the highest points, and the reflectivity of the lowest points, the valleys, and plugging them into this equation. And this can be done using this device because the same camera system is used for both the 2D reflectivity measurement and the 3D topography measurement. So it can overlay the reflectivity of the surface on top of the topography measurement and figure out what the reflectivity is at each elevation along the surface. So we know what the reflectivity is of the highest points as well as of the lowest points, and we can now calculate the reflectivity contrast. And this is important because reflectivity contrast, so this is the difference between the reflectivity of the highest points and the lowest points, and that's going to affect our perception of the depth of the surface. When the reflectivity contrast is higher, we perceive greater depth because we're seeing greater differences between the high points and the low points, even if there isn't physically any more space between the high points and the low points, it appears that there's more space. It appears there's more depth because of that difference, because of the contrast, because of the difference in the reflectivity between the high and low points. And so we have the reflectivity contrast plotted here against each of these samples. And we can see that the reflectivity contrast does appear to correlate with the apparent grain depth. Here we have sample one appears to have the greatest grain depth. And here it has the highest reflectivity contrast value. And here, to me, sample two looks to have the least grain or the least depth. And that, again, correlates with the reflectivity contrast value, which is the lowest for sample two out of all these samples. So we have different types of surfaces and different types of applications which require these different algorithms. So we have, that was just a brief look at the leather-like algorithm. But again, we do have algorithms for studying coarse paint, like powder-coated materials, as well as fine textures, which could be coatings or it could be plastics, like you might see on like consumer electronics, these finely textured plastics. And so we have the spectro2 profiler. So you can get your color and your traditional gloss measurement, as well as these new grain and texture measurements with the 2D reflectivity and 3D topography all in one instrument. So that was just a sort of brief taste of what the spectro2 profiler can do. I'll leave it there for today and open up the floor for questions.
Great. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that. Questions, please log them in the chat box and we'll get to them. A lot of really cool technology that will help, help standardize production and as well as QC, QA. Corey, while we're waiting for some questions or comments to come in, where do you see the biggest impact this instrument and this technology has? I know that's a pretty broad question, but like in terms of market or process, specific application, where have you seen just the most dramatic results?
I know we've made inroads into like vinyl producers. So as mentioned, interiors of cars where you have these materials that are meant to look like leather, but they're actually made of plastic, and it needs to have a consistent appearance when you have all these different pieces that are put together. So that's an important market. Powder coatings. I know we have a number of our salespeople on the line. If any of them want to chime in, where maybe they made some inroads in their travels, please.
Yeah.
Do so.
Yeah, and I know like extruded vinyl siding, things like that. A lot of construction materials. This is extremely, important and valuable. Got let's see, a few questions came in here. John asks, how large is the spot size for the different measurements?
The color measurement is a I wanted to say an inch circle, but I think that's actually the aperture size. So I don't know for sure what the exact spot size. I think it's 18 millimeters. That sounds right. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe 18 millimeters is the color. Not sure what gloss is, but for the 2D and 3D measurements for the texture and grain analysis, it is a 15 millimeter square.
Awesome. Awesome. Next question from Karen. Does this work on blasted aluminum surfaces?
Does it work on blasted aluminum surfaces? I myself have not done any direct work with blasted aluminum surfaces. Whenever we're unsure of something like that, what we like to do is get some samples from you and do some measurements and then discuss with you. So if you have any interest in that, if you have any ability to send us some samples, please get in touch with us
Yeah.
Outside of this webinar, and we can certainly set that up and do some measurements for you.
Yep, that's great. Any of the automated marketing messages you get, you can simply reply to those with your question, comment. Me or someone from my team will route it to Corey or the technical expert in that area. So don't be afraid to hit reply there. Next question for Anna. Thank you for shortening your name and telling me that note here. She asked a question. Hi, Corey. Is color, gloss, and texture given in each measurement? If so, how is the texture defined, and what angles is the gloss measured at?
Gloss is measured at 60. Yes, all of those things are given in one measurement. One click of the button. No moving the device around to do the different types of measurements. It's just position it over your surface. One click of the button, and you get color, gloss, and graininess. So yeah, 60-degree gloss. And the graininess, the topography, and the reflectivity measurements, those pictures are analyzed in various ways. So we went over 3 of those metrics that are used to analyze the grain: the mean cell size, cell amplitude, and the reflectivity contrast. So those are examples of the types of quantification you get that sort of correlates those pictures, those images, which you can get in the software. You can actually, it does download the images with the readings, the topography map. You can zoom in on that and look at the actual surface, but it also analyzes that and quantifies it and breaks it down into those various scales, such as those 3.
Nice. Next question from Eduardo. How will the readings be impacted using a leather-like algorithm with a fine-grained plastic part? Usually we have leather-like parts next to fine-like parts, and we are trying to harmonize both together in the same color.
That would take some playing around with. There's a reason that these measurements, there are so many different options for how to analyze these things in the software. You can adjust various parameters like the watershed segmentation, the depth of that, and other parameters like that that sort of affect the calculation of those values. And so it would be tricky to try to analyze 2 such different surfaces, but you could play around with that and try to come up with a way that would correlate with what you're seeing visually, so that the numbers match up with the visual, which is the point of all this. And again, if you'd like to send us some samples, perhaps one of our RSMs, our regional sales managers, can go to you with one of these devices and take some measurements, and we can play around with the data and see how we can help you.
Yeah, a lot of options there, either sending in data and working with Corey, or your regional person can come out, show you the instrument, take some samples, measurements there, and then work remotely with Corey to really analyze the data. So lots of options there. It's great. These questions keep rolling in. Oh, Eduardo responded that he does have the instrument. Are you in contact then with your sales rep? I'm assuming you can contact them, or we can put a note in our notes here after the webinar to have them get in contact with you to perhaps run some tests for you. I think that'd be beneficial. Okay, next one here from John. Can you measure texture if the material is placed behind glass? For example, would the glass reflectivity mess up the measurement?
Ooh,
that's a good question.
That is a good question.
You might have won Stump the Corey, John.
Yeah. I would imagine there could be some difficulty with the illumination causing glare on the glass and maybe messing up those measurements. But again, there is only one way to find out. And if you have any ability to let us take some measurements of your samples, we can certainly at least give it a try and see.
Yeah. Karen asks, is the color meter a spectrophotometer?
It is, yes. It does measure wavelength by wavelength, 10 nanometer resolution from 400 to 700. So it is a true spectrophotometer.
In addition to a gloss meter and a, what are they calling the texture? Topography meter? Topometer? I don't know. So we'll see here. Next, do you need to connect a computer to see or analyze the data?
It will give you the scales, the reflectivity contrast and the cell size and things like that. Right on the device, it has a big color touch screen on the top of it. So it's very easy to see. So yeah, you can, once you sort of dial in on your measurements, you can actually set tolerances on those values, and you can see the values right on the screen, and you can see immediately whether it's a pass or fail right on the device. So you can use it independently from the software.
And the software, that's a smart chart. Yes, Corey?
Yes, yeah. These all come with our smart chart software for analysis, and that's how you can set your standards, and you can view those topography maps and things like that. And that is, of course, as always, no additional charge. It comes with the instrument.
Nice. Let's see, next question. Ronald, do clear coatings interfere with the measuring textures?
I imagine clear coatings wouldn't be too much. Well,
It might have a similar effect as the glass question.
It might, especially if it's sort of smoothing the surface. Yeah, so again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but send us some samples. We'd love to take some measurements and find out firsthand.
Yep, exactly. See how well it goes. Eduardo, what is the application for the reverse leather algorithm? Because he does have the instrument. Is it a firmware update or?
It is a firmware. So I believe that one is actually still somewhat under development, so we might not have an official release. I'll have to look up the status of that. But the purpose would be to be able to analyze. There are some surfaces that instead of having these cells that stick up, they have sort of pits that stick down. And so the leather-like algorithm would not know how to handle that. So the reverse leather-like algorithm would be good for that. But I believe it can be used to actually directly test the molds that are used, that are pressed into these like vinyl materials and things.
Mm-hmm.
You could actually test the mold to see, whether the reflectivity is being reduced or whether the shape is right, things like that.
Yeah, he did say he's seen it in the software, that reverse. In the chat, I just put a link to our website that has all of the software, the latest versions. You might want to check what version you're running versus what we have on the site. That's usually the latest and greatest. If you don't see it there, you can always contact us and we can, help you figure it out. Like Corey said, figure out what's going on with that release. Other questions, comments? Like Corey said, for some of those unique situations, get with the local regional sales manager, contact us, contact Corey. We'll route it, to him as a technical expert, and we'll set up to get some samples and do some testing for you, either on site at your facility or at our lab. So we're always looking to do that. Other questions? We're on a roll there. Folks, what else you got for us? I know we have another few webinars. We usually run a couple every month, so stay on the lookout for additional invitations. We kind of run the gamut of our subjects, for everything from dispersion to color and appearance, texture like this, onto haze and clarity, a whole bunch of things. So there's always something for you, or if you need some information on a specific topic or application, feel free to reach out. We can get that back to you, get in touch with you. We have regional folks all over the country and the world as well, so that's not an issue. Other things that you've seen with this instrument, Corey? What are the big benefits? Oh, and Anna, yes, you will be sent a link with the recording. So you're welcome. So you'll get that link to the recording, then it's on demand and you can watch it anytime. Eduardo, how long does it take to send the spectrophotometer in for service? I think that just depends on what needs to be done to it. If it's just an annual certification, or if there's something major, and if we can do it in-house, or if we need to send it to Germany. We do make loaner instruments available as well, depending on that. So, again, Eduardo, we can have someone reach out to you, or feel free to reach out to us as well with what the situation is. We'd love to help you out, get that fixed up. So other stuff. Okay, question from Mark here. Is the contrast based on the minimum maximum reflectivity over the whole field of view, or is it just on the peaks and valley locations as identified by the watershed regions?
It's just the peaks and valleys. So it's taking all of the local peaks, the highest point on each of those cells, and comparing it to the closest neighboring minimum, the lowest point of those rivers, so to speak, and then averaging those differences across the entire surface. So it is just the peaks and valleys for the reflectivity contrast, but you also get the overall reflectivity value, which is an average of every pixel across the entire image.
Excellent. Follow-up question from Mark. When you export the digital images, what's the pixel resolution of those images?
Ooh.
That's another good question.
I don't know.
Let me see if I can get there. That is a very good question. Pixel images, do we even have that?
I'm looking right now to see if I can figure that out in real time.
Yep, exactly. I'm doing the same thing, so we'll see who finds it faster. Probably you.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, that's not listed. Yeah, we'll have to get back with you, Mark. Stump the Corey. We have a winner. Excellent. Okay. Other profiler type questions or things that you've seen out there, Corey, that either surprised you, of how well this is working, or results that you didn't expect?
Tested a number of odd materials that seemed to actually get pretty decent measurements. One was like wavy structured glass, Actually got pretty decent measurements. What else? Oh, ceiling tiles. You know, those sort of, I don't know, what are they made of? Those kind of,
I know what you're talking about.
uh,
Yeah.
you see them in like in office buildings a lot, and they're always textured to a degree.
Textured kind of drop ceiling tile type things.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Nice. Seems like that would work well. Other questions, folks? We got some little bit of time left here. Oh, found it. Mark, thank you. The resolution is 512 by 512 pixels. Is that in our tech specs? Did we miss that?
Um,
Oh, that's good.
okay. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Good discussion today, guys. Good questions. What else you got for us? Another round of Stump the Corey? Give it another minute here. I mean, if you know, later today, next week, you think of a question, feel free to hit respond to any of the messages or emails you get. We'll route it to Corey from the marketing department and get it in the hands of the right people who can take care of you. I think that might be it, sir. Okay. All right, let's wrap this one up. We appreciate the questions. We appreciate your time. Hope you learned something. If there's anything we can do to help, you know, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll get you in touch with the right technical people. Corey, appreciate your time and expertise. It's always a pleasure, sir. And we look forward to seeing you on future web seminars by Bit Gardener. So thank you all and have a great rest of your day.